Welcome everybody. I'm aware that I'm the last one of the afternoon, and we've had some really interesting talks already. So I'm hoping that you'll stay with me and, and engage in this session as well, in what I'm about to talk to you about this afternoon. So my background, I've been working now at the Staffordshire University for a couple of years, but I've been working in education since 1995. When I completed an undergraduate degree in art education. So my background is very much in the arts. Is where I started off. But what I left university and I went on to work predominantly with learners who'd got special educational needs, and that's something that is very close to my interests. I'm particularly passionate about inclusion and working with people who perhaps have not come through a traditional route into education, and particularly working with students in further education before I moved into a career working in university. So my background research that I'm interested in is around professional identity, particularly of teachers, and it's something that I researched for my doctorate, and looked at incidental learning, and I continue to be interested in inclusion, and particularly now around inclusion in higher education, because certainly for institutions and organisations such as Staffordshire University and post 1992 universities, we have a huge number of learners that come to us with a wide range of learning needs. And so it is still very much a focus of mine to think about how we look at engaging those students and working with that. And I currently am leading on the postgraduate certificate in higher and professional education and the academic professional apprenticeship here at Staffordshire. So I get to work with all of the early career teachers, which is really exciting. I've got a couple of books that I've been fortunate enough to have published, the most recent one of which is around professional identity and was based on my doctoral thesis, and that came out about a year ago. So I'm really, really lucky that that happened, and I'm sure that's something that I think we should all aspire to do, is to get our work out there and shared. And find the most latest publication that I've having published in March is I was lucky enough to be asked to write a chapter for this book around creative approaches to higher education pedagogy in the arts and humanities. I actually wrote the first chapter, and that's what I'm going to introduce to you this afternoon, is a bit around what that means and what that looks like. So the first question is, what is creativity and how can we be creative in our teaching? And I was really interested to hear the presentations from the previous presenters, because I think all of them are demonstrating huge variety in the way that we can engage learners through creative practices. And so I think it's quite a good one for me to end the session on, because everybody's already been talking very much and sharing ideas for how we can be creative in our teaching. But the word creativity, what we often think about when we think of creativity, links very much to the arts. And that can be very limiting when we're thinking about our own practice, particularly in teaching, because it can be what Parrish in 2012 said, somewhat hijacked by the arts sector. And what that can result in is some people defining themselves as, I'm very creative, or I'm not very creative. And that can actually be very limiting for teachers. So it's more than just artistic creativity. So it's important that we think about creativity in that much broader term, that we don't limit it to purely artistic endeavours and artistic talents. So what it is, if we think about it in that wider sense, it's about being able to produce work which is unique and novel. So this idea that we can be innovative and that we approach what we're doing with in a dynamic way, and it's a way of being able to problem solve and be able to build resilience through problem solving. It provides opportunities for people to engage in the creative process. So it's iterative, as I've said, and dynamic, and it's the ability to produce something that is unique. So Kleiman in 2019 talked about this as creativity and imagination, being able to sustain yourself through the challenges and opportunities that you encounter throughout your life. So it's a way of being able to approach life in a very open-minded way, that we feel that we are able to approach different situations and resolve those situations. And then thinking back on that when we're faced with similar situations, that we're able to also be successful in the way that we deal with those. And that's where that resilience can be built. So Sternberg argues that creative people are creative largely not by any particular inborn trait, but rather through and because of an attitude towards life. So it's this way that we respond to problems in a fresh way, rather than just being rather automated and responding to things, you know, like a robot. It's not about that. It's about our approach to different problems. And I think that what we've seen here this afternoon is a lot of different examples of the way that people are responding to problems that they've perceived or that they've experienced in their teaching, and that they've responded to that by creating something unique and innovative. And if any of you are sitting there thinking, well, I'd never be able to do that, I'm hoping that that through just a switch in the way that you think about your own practice, and rather defining yourself as I'm creative or I'm not creative, that you'll start to think that actually it's more about your attitude and your approach. So what does it mean for us as teachers? By viewing it from this stance, it gives more equity of opportunity. So it suddenly becomes more of an open opportunity for anybody, regardless of artistic talent, that they're able to feel that they can engage in the creative process, and that they are able to take on board new and exciting ideas for how they might want to deliver their teaching and work within their learning environment with their students. So through imaginative activities and context, learning can be enriching and a stimulating experience for both learners and lecturers alike. So it's around this idea of reimagining what we're doing, and the ways that we can represent that to our students. And I particularly liked that, you know, the blended approach that we've seen, but also using gamification with our learners through technology, but not necessarily. When we think about the Lego play, that's also a really good example of how we can engage with our learners. So this, the way that we reimagine what we're doing was very much forced through the situation we found ourselves in when faced with the recent pandemic. And it was a great opportunity, if we want to look at it in a positive way, for education to adapt and challenge convention and try new innovative approaches, something that certainly through technology and advocates of blended learning have been trying to do for many years. And now, because of the forced online and virtual learning environments and the way that that was, we had to adapt very quickly to that practice, is certainly seen now as something that we are far more comfortable and open to using and utilising as every day within our practice. So there has been a call for a commitment to experiential education instead of the staid, tired, and valueless traditional approaches to higher education. Now, you may question that and say, we were never staid and tired in higher education. And it's a bit of a contentious quote, because there are, I think we've made a move away from the large lectures, particularly in post-92 universities, because we have a particular type of learner that we need to adapt our practice for. And so we're already operating lots of innovation and innovative practice. Who we are as individuals also feeds into this, and it's something that we need to make sure that we question, and we're very clear about who we want to be in our professional identity. But it's more than that. It's also about where we work and the culture that we work within. So it's critical that we're able to develop a strong professional identity and the type of lecturer that we aspire to be. And that's very often based on our previous experiences, particularly if we also had experiences of going through the education system and not necessarily being from a traditional background. So especially where we're working within the practice sectors. So it's about creating the right learning environment, and we must first of all think about whether we're enabled to do that and what the organisation we work for and what their culture is. Lecturers should actively work towards an awareness of their identity. I do apologise for this spelling mistake there. Relationships, emotions and context that shape them. And Rogers and Scott produce a really nice, clear model of teacher development and how early career teachers move through their development as they're going through their practice and modeling what they're familiar with, but then starting to challenge conventions and finding their own voice and how they want to be as a teacher. And it's about reclaiming the authority of our voice. So there's a psychological shift in how they perceive themselves as teachers, and the way that we translate our new experiences into our existing experiences, and how that helps to inform, not only develop our professional identity, but also that idea of reclaiming that we have an important voice. And a number of lecturers that I talk to, particularly early career lecturers who've had a long background in practice outside of education, often talk about this idea of or struggle with their identity and feeling like an imposter. And there's this notion of imposter syndrome that can sit with us for quite a long time. But it's important that we start to build our identity and new experience are integrated into past experiences. So there's another little quote there around creativity emerges where management is not about command and control, but rather where diversity is encouraged. And that's so important, that we think about how we're supported by our teams, our mentors, and how the organisation is structured in order to allow lecturers to be feeling that they're able to take risks and that they're motivated, that if that doesn't work, that we'll try again, because that's the only way that we learn and we develop our practice. It's no good staying safe, but we need to think about how we can engage with that. When I did my teacher training, they said you should jump in at the deep end, and the more times you do that, the less you'll be fearful of trying things out. So key factors for creative learning environments. The learner should be provided with mutual respect. This is about building that collaborative and respectful relationship with our students, that we try and get to know our students so that they're given some flexibility with their learning, and that there's opportunities for open-ended possibility. So this idea of a less structured approach to what we're delivering, that there's time built in for problem solving and opportunities for incidental learning through engagement when things go wrong, this term disjuncture. It's not always, everything doesn't always go exactly as we plan. And that's where we learn quite a lot, when things don't always go to plan. And that's great, that's that problem solving. And what we've looked at already this afternoon through some of the other lectures about how we provide those opportunities. There should be some control over their learning, so they have the freedom of ideas, but there is also a safe space. Not always possible to have visual displays of work in progress, but one of the ways we can get around this is by encouraging our learners to produce visual displays of their work. It can be posters and to present that. So it gives them an ongoing feeling of engagement. Opportunity with for collaboration with peers, lots of ways that we can do that, and innovative resources that we can use with our students to engage them in what they're doing, and drawing from external partnerships. So really pulling on experts from the field and making sure that what we're teaching is authentic and that we have those opportunities for authentic learning that link back to employment and future employability. Key factors for successful online learning environments. Opportunities for what we put here is carefully considered asynchronous opportunities prior to the session. So that those, what we're asking our learners to do outside of the taught sessions, the synchronous sessions, but that it's meaningful and that it's well thought through, and that they do have access to technology, not always possible again, and we need to be aware of that, but that their use of gamification really, and we've seen, like I said, seen some excellent examples of that this afternoon. Be mindful of Zoom fatigue. So I'm very aware that we've all been online now for a couple of hours, building in breaks. One of the thoughts from Hall there from the research that they did was around having 5-minute breaks, comfort breaks once every hour, just to get students to stand up, stretch their legs, etc. Live discussion forums. Actually, the research shows that this reduces a sense of isolation. So giving students the opportunity to have discussions, but also being mindful of introverted students who need time to reflect and respond, and what we term as hiding behind the screen. Online can provide flexibility, but it can also result in disengagement, as we know that we have students that sign in and then they disappear, so it looks like they're part of the session and they're not being active within that session. And there are also all sorts of other things that we need to consider around that. Okay, just some final thoughts before we finish. It is important that we strike a balance between too many demands, which can be very stressful, and too few demands, which can lead to boredom for both our students and ourselves. It's a good idea to have, to think about what we've been gifted here. One benefit that's come out of this terrible situation through the pandemic, is there an opportunity now to be creative in what we do and to rethink and reimagine what that means and what education looks like. And I like this quote. It's a bit about being mindful that a repackaged resource might only end up with the lecturer being creative, but the students are not necessarily engaged in creative practice themselves. So providing opportunities for all to flourish with new ideas, that's including the students as well as yourself. So you might be busy having a lovely time, but it's about how creative can you actually enable your students to be as well. So final quote there is, creative teachers need to develop a full repertoire of skills which they can adapt and apply to different situations. And I think that's enough from me.